At this time, per the suggestion of Mr. Falk, I would like to open up this particular space and place for a question and answer session. I believe it is propagated and located in your program. So I would be glad to provide some redress to the questions that you may have. I know I will have some books out there in the vestibule area. I have a new book coming out. It's going to be my 7th book called Dear Queen. And it's really about empowering our women to recognize their value, know their worth. You really have to understand that queen means quintessentially unique, empowering everyone naturally. So I want you to get that book as well as some other books. I'm doing an advance order today. They're all on clearance, y'all. So they're all on sale. Get 2, one for you and somebody else. I'll open it up for questions and answers. Yes, we have one. The young lady in the white sweater, or shirt, rather.
First of all, your wording and your word choice gave me chills.
Appreciate you.
But I'd like to ask about your views and thoughts on the relationship between Dr. King and Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel.
I'm not so much familiar with his work. Please tell me.
So, from what I know, during the March on Washington, they walked hand in hand. I just wanted to know what you knew about it and if you knew anything about it.
You said Abraham?
Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel.
Oh, Rabbi Abraham. Yes. You know, one thing that Dr. King was a proponent of was the intersection of communities, and particularly even the Jewish and the black community together. And one thing that he really was suggesting, especially towards the end of his life, was a redistribution of wealth to the black community. Not so much, yes, even reparations, but more so black communities building wealth distribution for themselves. I believe it was April 3rd of 1968 when he stood in Memphis and he preached his last message, I've been to the mountaintop. He said, we need to boycott certain companies if they are not honoring us or even honoring our dollars. Yes, Black Lives Matter, but green dollars do too. And so the whole aspect of the intersection of communities and learning from each other. You know, the black dollar, they say, only circulates 6 to 8 hours in the black community, but the Jewish dollar or other dollars in the communities circulate times 10 that. And so the whole aspect of, yes, a Paradise Valley, even in our communities, a black bottom, we have to understand that entrepreneurship as well as education is the key foundational element. And so that march, those marches were not just black people, but it was racially inclusive. And if you think about those who are marching, it wasn't just those with the gray heads and the beards, it was a lot of young people. Imagine standing up on your feet that long. It's not going to be a 70, 80-year-old individuals. It's going to take the young giants to come up. And so the intersection of those communities was very important to the march. So thank you for your question. Okay. Who's got the mic? We'll go to this young lady here. These 2 young ladies and that young lady up there. I guess y'all don't want to ask no questions over here. So, all right. Y'all too scared. We're going to go over here. It's all right.
It's been a long time since I've been a young lady, but thank you.
Well, you know, black don't crack and brown won't let you down, so.
Ooh, it was a long time ago. My question is, Dr. Connor, thank you for your work at Mary Grove. I'm a Mary Grove alumni.
Yes, I thought you looked familiar, yes.
Yes, and my question is, you bring your words to life. And I want to know if you have a videotape of your speech. My family had to work today, and I would really like them to enjoy it as well as I.
Mr. Falk has given me the thumbs up. He says yes. But also there's plenty more on my website as well, eddieconnor.com. The revolution won't just be televised, it'll be digitized. So go there. CONNOR. Yeah, so you can get that there as well as Mr. Falk. Yes.
I just wanted to thank you as well for coming here. I really appreciate everything that you said.
Oh, appreciate it.
And I just like the young lady in the white sweater said, I appreciate the way that you said it.
Thank you so much.
And I had a couple of questions. Do we have a limit? Can I like take some of their questions over there?
Well, if Usher was here, he'd say no limit, but I don't know, so.
Oh, no, I only got 4. It's not like a whole lot.
She's fine, okay. They gave me the thumbs up, go ahead.
Okay, cool. So you've been the author of 7 books. I was curious, if you could only recommend one book to us, which one would you encourage us to read and why?
Well, I've got 7, and if I had 7 children, that's like asking me what's my favorite one. I got 7 pieces of cheesecake.
Well, I could only afford one, so which book you want me to buy?
You know I got to play with you, sis. I would say 2 of my most prominent ones, of course, Dear Queen, I would say yes, but also Heal Your Heart. I wrote that as well for ladies in mind. You really can't deal with the issue until you heal from it. And so both of those books, Heal Your Heart is kind of like the parent, and Dear Queen is like the daughter. So either one of those 2 books, especially I recommend for ladies, you'll be fine. You'll be good with those, yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
And I was Googling some of your books just out of curiosity. I saw that you wrote a book, My Brother's Keeper. Is that at all related to Barack Obama's initiative, My Brother's Keeper?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, because I saw your name and his name.
Yeah, My Brother's Keeper really comes from the whole aspect of what Frederick Douglass said. If we build strong children, we won't have to repair broken adults. But I like to say if we build strong boys, we won't have to repair broken men. And so My Brother's Keeper tells about the work that I did to transition and transform and bring change, along with former Congressman Hanson Clark, with our resolution, which became the impetus for My Brother's Keeper initiative, but also the work that needs to go on in the community for our young males, particularly Black and Hispanic brothers, when they're building prisons based on 2nd and 3rd grade reading scores. You know, we've got to provide some remediation and change because illiteracy and incarceration are so interconnected. So you got to pick up that book. That's going to give you a really in-depth perspective.
Okay. And then how old were you when you realized that you wanted to turn, the negative things that have happened to you into a positive? Like, how old were you when you realized that you wanted to be an influencer?
You know, the work that I'm doing today, I never saw myself doing it at all. You know, at the age of 17, my guidance counselor in school told me I wouldn't go to college. She said, much less even go to community college. She didn't even see me going to OCC. She said, pick up a trade. She said, I did not have what it took to get to the next level with higher education. So to now have a PhD, but for her it stood for a player-hater degree, you see, and be a professor at a college, Marygrove College, that is really a testament to that you can overcome anything. And so I didn't see myself doing the work that I am doing now, much less even writing a book. But in college, when I read a book by Dr. Michael Eric Dyson, I May Not Get There With You, by Dr. King, as well as another book, As a Man Thinketh, by James Allen, that really began to transition and transform my thought, to really see that I do have value. If I'm here on the planet, that means I do have purpose. As long as you have a pulse, you have purpose. You got to do something with it. And so that has brought me to this stage that I am now. So.
Okay,
Just got to look within and find it. It's there. You know, the other day I was looking for my glasses and they were on my face. I was looking for my phone and it was on my ear. I know that's none of y'all, but a lot of times we're looking for what we already have. It's in you. Don't look around you. Look within you.
Okay. I think you answered my last question. I was going to ask what type of advice, you've already given us so much, but what advice would you give to someone who also wanted to be an influencer in time?
I would say, find out what your niche is. Oftentimes we look at the what, the how, the where, instead of looking at the why. You know, we say, well, I want to get this amount of money. I want to have this amount of notoriety. I want to drive this car. Why, though? If you don't have it, who are you without it? And so oftentimes we let valuables determine our value. If you lose it, some people lose themselves. And so find out what's your why. What's your purpose? What is the passion that you have leads you to the path of your purpose. It's not too late to be great. It's not too early to get started. But you have to ask yourself that why, write down your goals, itemize them, but also have an action plan behind it and run with the vision.
Okay, well, thank you again. I really appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, we have the young lady, a few rows up. Okay, I'm sorry. I see y'all wouldn't ask no questions. I stopped looking at y'all. All right, we're going to come over here.
Oh, okay. I got two questions. Okay, for those of y'all who know me, y'all know this is my bag. So, but I'm gonna make it quick. My first thing is that I agree entirely with what you were saying about our generation being connected and disconnected. Where we live in a generation where you associate soft-heartedness and kindness with weakness, and and it's very materialistic and selfish. Whereas I need to have this. So I do agree with what you were saying, and I want to know if your generation is any different from ours.
Well, I'm not too far from you now.
No offense.
You know, I graduated high school in 2000, so I'm not too far behind you. But, you know, even there are some differences, because, you know, I taught high school for 11 years, and I saw the transition or transformation in high school from when I went to where kids are now. And oftentimes, television gives people tunnel vision. And just like you said, you know, oftentimes meekness is seen as weakness. And we've allowed society to dictate to us about how we should feel about ourselves, how you should dress or feel about who you are in essence. And really the whole aspect is you have to define yourself based on the parameters you set, not based on Kim Kardashian, not based on many of these other celebrities or things of that nature. Not about being entertained, but being informed. And just like I said, the world is an ocean of knowledge, but so many people are drowning in ignorance. And as a young person, the aspect that you have to bring is a level of standard. What are my standards? What is my value? Who am I? Not based on popularity, but how powerful I feel about myself. And that really leads you to your purpose and how you really influence and bring change to your school and your community and your society.
Yeah, it's like everything nowadays is just one big trend where it's this one, you put on the front that you hard and you cold-hearted so that you don't catch feelings, and that is just so irritating to me. But it's wrong to be compassionate. But my second thing was, okay, you turn on the TV and every day you see brutalization of black bodies. And it's so commonplace now that it's numb. And, you know, like they're just, like you start to see comparisons where the Dylan Roof kid who went into the church, shot a whole bunch of people, they're just now starting to get those people their justice. He told them, there's nothing wrong with me, I'm not mentally disabled, I knew exactly what I was doing. Whereas you could have an African-American person who could commit that same crime, but they'll put him in jail immediately. I just wanted to know what your thoughts were on like police brutality in the black community. Because I have little brothers. I have little brothers who are black men in my household, and the last thing I would want is for them to step foot out of the door and be killed for nothing.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's so disturbing what is going on in America. And I'm worried about a new administration coming in just a few days from now, where it seems as it may always be Friday the 13th. I'm wondering, when you think about, you know, police brutality, you know, you tell our young men to pull up their pants, they do that. You tell them to keep their hands on the steering wheel, they do that. You tell them to be subservient to an officer, they do that, but they're still brutalized and killed. And so it seems as if we're living in 1957 or 67 instead of 2017, because it doesn't seem as if much has changed there has been some progress for race relations, yes, but it doesn't seem as if it should be where it's supposed to be. And where can a black man go where he's not a victim? It seems oftentimes that he's a victim in his own community and then a victim in the greater society of America. And he's living in destitute situations where you tell him to pull himself up by his bootstraps, but that's absolutely impossible. And so the question becomes, how do we have, and Dr. Michael Eric Dyson is writing a new book. I was just sitting down with him at lunch called Tears That We Cannot Stop. He's got a section there called Coptopia, which is all about a level of community policing. You know, how can you police an area that you don't have any knowledge about or either live in adequately? If you don't have any prior knowledge of a community or even a relationship with the residents, you become off-putting or offsetting based on what you see in the media, which is stereotypical media portrayals about a certain group or ethnicity. And so it really becomes the question of, we have to engage like never before to save the lives, and not just save, but build the lives of our young people, especially our black and brown brothers, who are oftentimes the victims of the negative that is going on in society. And I think we just can't turn a blind eye to it and put our face in the sand. We've got to really roll up our sleeves, and we've got to have think tanks. We've got to have really courageous conversations, not with just those who are of a homogeneous race, but all inclusive, and bring in those who are serving as policemen and women in our communities to really quell many of these issues, and how to deal with issues or individuals that may be obstinate. We can name all the names and say, did they deserve to be killed when you could have not choked an Eric Garner? When you could not have, you didn't have to kill a Michael Brown? If somebody's of another race is getting a taser, why do we have to get a bullet? If they're being, Dylan Roof, he was in, matter of fact, they gave him Burger King before they took him in. What do we get? Bullets before we've even been questioned. I don't see the commonality there. It's just injustice. Injustice. Justice for y'all, but not all. I hope I answered that. And I think we need young people like yourself who could provide some remediation for that. So thank you for that question.
Y'all don't get mad at me. I got one more comment. I just feel like America is the land of the free, but depending on who you are, I feel like being a minority in general in America is bad for you because you are racially profiled. Like, people do not, it's like being black, it's kind of like you're being treated like a trend, like you're being treated like cattle. Like, you want to take off our skin and wear it because it's popular. Like, one big thing is that you just feel like one whole trend, your vernacular, that's a trend. The way you dress is a trend. The way you talk is a trend. And, like, things are getting so bad in America, it's almost chimerical. Like, it's, like, unbelievable. It's like waking up from a dream and having vertigo. Like, it just doesn't even make any sense. Like,
Absolutely.
okay, that's all. I'm done now.
Absolutely. As we talk about the dream, we can't ignore the nightmare. We cannot do it. All right. Okay, the young lady right. Matter of fact, let's go to this. Matter of fact, I need to go over here first. I've got to be inclusive. This is the diversity and inclusion department, so I got to do that.
I just want to say you did a fantastic job with your speech. But one thing I have to say actually is, we hear a lot about police on black crime, but we have gotten so used to the black on black crime in a common society, such as Chicago, with 742 people dead in just 1 year, almost 1,000. That's crazy. But I wanted to say is, do you think when our education system in the inner community is much more prominent, more stronger, like it is in the suburban counterparts, do you think we were able to move forward as a community and remove black on black crime as it is today?
Very good question. You can think about the PPE per pupil expenditure, that you can choose a Detroit school versus a suburban school and see that it's unequal. I believe it's the average is $7,500 per pupil expenditure in Detroit, but you look at other communities, especially in the suburbs, and it's what, $10,000 plus. So it's kind of like a race to the bottom. And the inadequacy in education is economically driven. So if it's economically driven, and there's inequality with the basic level of what somebody should be given, and that is being able to read, write, arithmetic, many of those things. Why are there prisons that are in better condition than schools? Why is it that individuals, our children, are being acculturated into a prison system. You go through the school and it's a metal detector. Prison's the same thing. You pat it down. Same thing. Your books, your lockers are checked. Same thing. Because now the people who are living in those communities, who are teaching in those communities, who may not live there, are feeling afraid of those who you teach. How can you teach somebody who you're afraid of? How can you love when there's a modicum of hate that's in your system? And so I think we have to really look at, we talk about equality, but let's look at education. It's not equal. When the average 12th grader in Detroit graduates with a reading level that's at a 4th grade level, 75% of young people who start 9th grade in Metro Detroit don't graduate. 60% of the illiteracy rate, 60% of Detroiters are functionally illiterate. So guess what? All of that leads to, yes, incarceration. Not just incarceration where orange is the new black, but it's an incarceration because you're locked out of a job. You're locked out of love. Now there's perpetuated hate because you're now having to try to raise a family and you don't have adequate income. Poverty, education coincide. So I think we need bright minds like yourself to gain a seat at the table, talk to boards of education, hold the new administration, Secretary of Education, to provide, equality for all, to where the playing field is level. Hopefully I answered that. Okay, let's go here to this young lady. She's got the Nike hat, just do it.
Thank you.
We'll get it done.
You talked a lot about Martin Luther King and how he took like a peaceful stance, but what is your viewpoints on Malcolm X, because he kind of was fighting for the same thing with a different approach?
Absolutely. And history has not necessarily done those two justice. Dr. King moved in a different way, and that is, yes, he's peaceful. We just seen him as a peace purveyor. But I think you have to not just necessarily look at everything up to 1963. I think you have to look past that, especially 65 to 68, where Dr. King had, it seems like the temperature of his soul was turned up a little bit more, where he had more of a rage in him. If you look at his speech, when he spoke out about the Vietnam War, April 4th, 1967, it's not ironic that he was killed April 4th, 1968, 1 year to the day of when he spoke out. Malcolm X, who said nobody can give you justice, nobody can give you freedom or equality. If you're a man or a woman, you have to take it. And I think, yes, there were a lot of differences, but I believe there was also a lot of commonality. And I saw towards even, if you look at their lives, it seemed as if they were going to intersect. And one thing that the FBI said, it's contained, it's on documents, it's in documentaries, and that is always get rid of a black messiah that seems to arise out of a community. That's King, that's Malcolm X, that's also other prominent leaders, that's Medgar Evers, many of those other individuals, to say, yes, indeed, there was a conspiracy to take them out. Black leadership now leads to black development, black families coming together, black economic growth. So society wants to polarize them, when in many cases there are a lot more similarities than differences. And I think they were both needed and prominent in our community. And I think we can't just celebrate them as pillars, but we have to take their principles and really exact them in our society today. Okay, we go to the young lady, go to the lady up there, yes.
I just want to share something with you because I actually lived through that time and
Yes.
Dr. King. And I need you young folks to understand it's not just a history book, okay? The reason that Dr. Martin Luther King and all of the others that were part of that movement are heroes of mine is because every day they walked out knowing that someone was probably going to kill them.
Yeah.
And they walked out anyway. Black, white, yellow, rabbis, ministers, preachers, everybody that was part of that group, take the time, go to the library, use your phones, get on Google, and find out about all of those heroes, all of those people that are braver than I will ever be, and braver than most of you, because they stepped out the door, and they knew that they were going to die. It was just a matter of when. So, please, this isn't just a day for a speech and to get extra credit in your class. Take this time to think about how brave these people were and what they accomplished.
Absolutely. Very well said. New generation of leaders is needed. Okay, let's come down here. Let's come down here. We've got a hand here, and I'm coming around. I'm coming around the mountain. Here I come.
Thank you. Thank you for mentioning the library. I just wanted to say thank you for your inspiring words. They're inspiring to everybody here. Thank you for your call to action. And regarding the books that you've written, I work in the library at this campus, and I intend to order them for the library. So for anybody in the audience who has limited funds, it's great that you buy them, but don't forget to use your college library and your public library, because we have the books by Dr. King, we have the books by Michael Eric Dyson, we're going to have your books. So use your library. Thank you.
Thank you. Honored to be included. Okay, was there somebody in this section? Okay. Going back to this young lady here. You just passed her up.
Okay.
And I'm coming over here. Yes.
Recently, it's been a thing where a group of black gentlemen were beating up a mentally retarded white boy about politics and about this Donald Trump election. And there's been a lot of rage about the Donald Trump election, like with violence, some nonviolent. So what do you have to say about that? Like, what do you think should happen, or how do you think it could be fixed?
Well, first and foremost, violence is wrong, whether it's black on white or white on black or any other ethnicity. Violence begets violence. So hate produces more hate. It does not quell the issue. And it's a nonviolent approach. It has to be the place of love that where it comes up. But the question is, I think even as an addendum to that, what is going on in the minds of those young people, or their backgrounds, or what they've been exposed to where they feel that it is okay to perpetuate and exact that violence? Are they living in, not to excuse the behavior at all, because we all know right from wrong. And oftentimes people become so influenced to where their mind is redacted and reprobate to where they feel that it is okay. We're living in an age and day that everything is live now. Facebook Live, Instagram Live, Periscope Live. And so many times people are doing negative things for a reaction. You know, oftentimes these things create a circus to where you see a lot of clowning going on. And the question is, what is the ramification as to the result of what has taken place to where these people exacted that type of behavior? And I think America has to look at itself in the mirror too. What is going on in our communities to where this violence and racial vitriol is escalating? It's not so much that this has stopped. It's now that we have phones that capture it. It's not that it's just stopped. We've always had it, but now we're able to capture it. Since we're capturing it, how can we begin to end it? I think that's what we have to do, and also stand up against it and say, no, violence is wrong in any way, shape, or form. And we don't need that. We don't have that. That is not the true way for humanity to live in a beloved community. Okay, let's go right here. We got the middle section.
First off, I want to thank you for coming to speak today. You've done a wonderful job. I think you serve as a role model for a lot of underprivileged individuals. I think your story is a great one that needs to be told. Obviously, as a white male, I have not been on the receiving end of the injustice that a lot of my fellow black and brown Americans have been on the receiving end of. But I think that it's wrong, and I want to change things. I mean, you mentioned you're not racist, but you know, do you benefit from the policies of racism? And you know, I probably am one of those individuals because of my skin color, and that's wrong, and I want to change that. So how would you recommend to people who aren't necessarily on the receiving end of the oppression but still want to fight the oppression, how would you recommend fighting the oppression to those sorts of individuals? Thank you.
Great question. And I think great question. Give them a round of applause on that. I think a lot of people seated in this audience today were thinking that, but you verbalized it in a great way. You know, I'll preface it by saying you don't have to look like me to fight for me. That is just get in the fight with me. The way to do that is not just, you know, you run down to a community that you think is primarily urban and say, hey, let's get in the fight together. That's definitely not what you do. I wouldn't suggest you do that. I would suggest, and that is just engaging in courageous conversations. And that is expanding oftentimes the narrow prism that we have. And I believe most people are good-hearted. It's definitely true. But oftentimes we have been, you know, they say Michigan is the most racially segregated, one of the most racially segregated cities in America based on the zoning aspect of how the housing in the communities are. And so, especially being involved in opportunities like this is automatically the start. Networking with individuals who are from different backgrounds, who are from different sects of society that you are, is one of those ways. Breaking outside of the box of what makes you feel comfortable. If it's making you a little uncomfortable and at the conversation, I think it's okay sometimes, especially if it's not perpetuating violence against you. But being able to open up yourself to have some conversations that aren't necessarily comfortable to have, I think is one of those starting points. Does it say, oh, well, I need to find as many black friends as I possibly can? I'm not going to say no, but but I'm not gonna say, you know, that's not the proper way to do it. It's just, I would say, being a part and looking to place your foot in a specific conversation, specific community events like this one, to where you now open up yourself to hearing different perspectives. And I think that is one of the preeminent ways, especially how the civil rights movement was able to engineer itself. It wasn't just all one racial group together. It was many different faces, many different individuals who came together and said, guess what? I may not have your specific skin color, but guess what? I want to get in the fight with you, even though I don't look like you. I want to fight for you and with you. And that's a real teammate. That's a real teammate. Okay, let's go over here. This young lady here.
Thank you. So, police, kind of to go back to her thing, police brutality has, in my opinion, at least been more publicized lately. And I'm not just talking about one race or anything, it's just a total. And it seems to focus on one end rather than the other, and I don't understand why that is, and why not we're not talking about police brutality as a whole, and why we just, as many people, just focus on just the main African American policemen rather than also the white, and why that is. I'm not asking you.
I'm trying to gauge the question a little bit. You just addressing why
Well,
is that?
Yeah, that's my question. Why is it like that?
Well, you know, this country was not always constructed on equality for all, even though it was prefaced that way by Thomas Jefferson. And if you really look at the history of policing in the black community, it really began as, it's a historical research that I encourage you to do. It really began as slave catching. The policing aspect in the black community began as slave catching. And so as slaves would try to run away, or if they got out of pocket, so to speak, a lot of times they'd be beat, they'd be maimed, they'd be lynched, and of course don't involve a book because reading was seen as a threat that would just not free you mentally, but also possibly physically. So with that, the police brutality has had a long history in many underserved and underrepresented communities that perpetuated discrimination and segregation, that perpetuated someone who's seemingly free, but still psychologically and socially incarcerated by the manacles of society. And so one thing is that it has not been quelled. And we continue to see it escalate itself. We saw it even, especially the civil rights movement. You see it dictated and depicted in many movies about the past, but it continues to rear its ugly head. And I think that's why we have to, as I was saying before, engage in ways that, why does an officer feel threatened based on the color of someone's skin or how they look? Because they wear a hoodie. You know, my mother was pulled over the other day, and she just told me this, and she said that the man first asked her before anything, even for license and registration, is this your car? You know, my mother's been educated for 30 years, never sold a crack rock to do what she does. And that's the first question she was asked. And so she told me that she was really disheartened by that. She's never had it. She was trying to be as meek and as mild as and kind, and she's a praying woman, church woman, as best as she could. So automatically I think of Sandra Bland. Why is it that these things happen? And I think as we continue to ask that question, why, I think it moves us closer to finding a way to the answer to deal with it. Can you get rid of racism? No. It'll never go away. Those issues will never go away because we continue to castigate ourselves based on race, based on class, based on gender. How do we mitigate these isms? And I think that brings us to the question that we have to have more conversations and do more listening than anything.
Well,
yeah.
oh, sorry. Go ahead.
So that's all I was going to say.
All
We
right.
have to.
But what I really meant to ask was, why does the media focus on one end rather than the other? And I understand that there are different sources of media and how a lot of the media is biased toward one side and other, like depending on where you get your news is. But why don't we all talk about police brutality as a whole rather than just specifically African American? Because there are white police officers that do get in trouble as well. Mm-hmm. And I'm not excusing any of it because it is awful, but I just don't understand why there's a separation of why we talk about one more than the other, rather than we should be talking it all as a whole.
Well, I think we have to hold our newsmen and women accountable. You know, whether it's writing to them, whether it's tweeting to them, whatever form or way that you can share that message to where the whole story is shared. I think that's very important. So we'll have one more question. Y'all really working me today. Okay, all right, one more question. Let's go to the young lady right below you. No, I'm talking about you. Right below the lady who's holding the mic, see? For those who have more questions, I'll be glad to talk with you one-on-one. That's fine.
Okay, hi.
Hey.
I really enjoyed your speech, by the way, but I just want to say, how do you like say, okay, you know about Black Wall Street, right?
I do.
Yeah, and how it's like destroyed and everything. So say we rebuild our Black Wall Street and the black community becomes as wealthy as other racial communities. Do you think then we would be able to join in as a nation to actually battle racism? Because it seems right now we're still stagnant.
You know, I'll say that, and I'll exit left. One thing is this: the black community has a $1.3 trillion buying power. Okay, if we leveraged all those resources together and pulled all of our resources together monetarily, we'd be the 12th to 16th richest nation in the world. One thing is, how are we using those resources? Are we using them on expendable items? When you just drive the car off the lot and automatically the value depreciates itself? Is it just nail done, hair done, everything did? Oh, you fancy, huh? You wear your wealth. I think we have to get into the aspect of not just being purchasers, but producers. Creating wealth. There's a business idea inside of you. There's an entrepreneurial aspect inside of you. And I think we have to do more owning than just purchasing. Own something. Create something. And that's what will develop a new Wall Street, where your name will be on the wall and on the street. Appreciate you all.
Please join me in thanking Dr. Connor once again. I want to thank each of you for being in attendance today at today's MLK Convocation, and I'd also like to, one more time, if you could join me in thanking our student performers. I'd like to invite our student performers and Dr. Connor back on stage for a few quick photos, and I'd like to wish all of you a great rest of your day. Thank you.